All right, so since I'm not in class today, we're gonna meet anyway. But I just thought I would record this ahead of time, and just kind of thinking about what you need to pay attention to and how you can be ready for class next week. So the first thing is to wrap up assignment 5, your video, and with that, remember today was intended to be your last day of class time to work. You have until the start of next class and it's not late. So if you needed to come in during open lab time, if you needed to work from home, that's okay. But we need to get it done, right? But you have a little bit of flexibility there, that you have until the start of next class to actually finish it and complete it. Okay? So remember to include any video clips that you intend to use, pages turning, graphic from the book as a Photoshop file is easiest, the best, the book cover, background music, and then as you're looking at any of these, consider transitions. Do you want to fade in, fade out, dip to black, something like that, right? So remember these items. Nothing new. Shouldn't be anything new there, okay? So finishing and exporting is something I want you to pay attention to, right? I went out of order here. That's okay. But here's that file that I want to include. I want to include this pig running. So in your Photoshop work, as I'm doing that preparation, all I need is for it to be on its own layer. And you can see here that I have a background layer showing. You don't need that, but the pig running, name the layer and do what you need to do on that layer. Okay? You can ignore layer 1 there. Then I go in and make it. I have everything that I need. You can see that pig running right in the middle, on track 2, pig running. And I have it twice. I just duplicated that. All right, this is not exactly like what you are doing. You have some other components that you're paying attention to, but the structure on the left of the project folder, and then you have all of that in your sequence. Okay, so bean building of that, including what I need. Then I go into export, and I just wanted to highlight a few things within this for attention to detail. So here's my export screen. You're going to do your format there at the top as H264. The next thing to change, remember, is the output name. Click on that. It should be last name A05. To begin with the H264, it is actually an MP4 file, and we'll look at that in a moment. So you should be exporting video and audio. You should be, if you look in the lower left of the screen here, you should have those white triangles going all the way. It's going to capture whatever's between those. And then your basic video settings, 1920 by 1080. So make sure that all those are set. That's your first export, okay? Then you just push the export button. That's nothing new. Then to compress that a little bit better, make it a little bit higher quality, there is a PDF on Blackboard, course content, just exporting 1080p PDF. And what that does is it has you open what you just exported into QuickTime Player and exporting it as a movie file. I believe I showed you some examples of the number of files, the file size is completely different. So we want to compress this just so it's smaller, just so we don't need a 500 megabyte video yet. So go into QuickTime Player, file, export as 1080p, and that will create a movie file. Okay, that's what that PDF is for. What I just mentioned, this PDF walks you through that. I realize that the screenshots on there are a little bit different, so I just wanted to highlight the fact that it's just QuickTime Player file, export as. Okay, so once you get that, once you're finished, a couple things here. Post it to YouTube. Post it to Spark. Post your YouTube to Spark. And then send me those links. Please don't forget to do that. I know some of you are missing that, so give me those, okay? In YouTube, you can use your thumbnail that we did before, the trailer. Think about that. Then upload to Google Drive. Order of those doesn't really matter, but you need to submit what you need to submit. All right, so last name A05 folder on Google Drive with your script, storyboards, and the movie file. Last name A05 movie. Okay, so that's what you need to finish. Pay attention to your time for sure, okay? Because we're going to get into animation next. And this is some prep for what I want you to be ready for on next week's class or for next week's class. Remember, what we have as we pay attention is the idea of what is the best use of our time for the rest of the term. So we'll look at a calendar and break things down that way. And we're going to talk a little more in depth in animation, but I want you to consider, what do you want to animate? What in your book? What do you want to animate? And then kind of going a little bit deeper, what would be best? You know, often we have this idea of, oh, I'm going to have this incredible animation throughout my book. And then you look at your calendar and it's the last day of class and you need to move a little bit quicker, right? So what would be best? Keeping it simple and then moving on from there, all right? So here's an example we'll go through, but what would you animate here? This is the book cover. What would you animate? Easy things would be to animate, have the book cover appear, perhaps, have the author's names appear, and play a little bit perhaps with maybe this yo-yo, since there's those dashed lines, maybe I could make that fly around. I could move the arms and have them wiggle around so there's digging. I could have things start to appear. You know, what would be ideal or what would be fun to do would be all of these the ball, the stuffed animal, the drum, all of those things appearing. But what is best with my time? So here's some quick things that you might consider. What would you add for motion? And if I flip back here real quick, for motion, like I said, I could have the yo-yo kind of moving around, maybe. Okay. I could rotate things. I could scale things. I could pan and zoom, which is you take something static and you move the camera, not the artwork. I could rotate as a whole. I could scale things. Again, you see those mentioned there multiple times. I could move from point A to point B. I could play with opacity. And then I want to think about, how would I do transitions from one page to the next of the book? Okay, so just some thinking, just trying to get you going with that. All right, so let's say here's what I wanted to do with that book cover. I would break everything that I wanted to do animation on, break it onto its own layer. This is just a screenshot, so you can't see, I can't show you everything, clicking on the eyeball, but the background copy is what you see here. Authors would appear, title would appear, and yo-yo would appear. I'm going to rename those layers for organization. And then I'm going to just save these as a Photoshop file. That's it. Because again, we'll get into this with our last tutorial, first one related to animation. But I need to set up the structure first. Okay. So for next class, we're going to start by watching your film trailer. And what I would encourage you to do, ask you to do on that day, is just give us like a one sentence, here's what happens in the book. Thinking about what was your intended or actual emotions. Do you want it to be scary? Do you want it to be happy? Do you want it to be funny? And then thinking about what kind of connections are there between the book and the video. So how would this, not only how would it transition, but how is it related? Hopefully we see some of these things, perhaps, but we might have a conversation about that. But that's the next class. We will be doing these, watching them. Not long. They're not long videos. Okay. So also for next class, watch some samples of what has been animated. These are ones I've been showing you throughout the term. But watching samples just on YouTube, If you go into week 12 of Blackboard, you can find a link to those on YouTube or just watch them in Blackboard. That doesn't matter. But watch a sample or two, scrub through them. You don't need to watch them the whole thing, but you can. Thinking about what is actually being animated. Then I want you to start analyzing your book. Break it into 3 to 6 sections. That's just a good thumbnail, just a good rough idea. Not a thumbnail. Break it into 3 sections. The first section is what assignment 6 is. You can look at it at a range of 30 to 60 seconds. But what we will do, that's what you'll turn in. And then as soon as that one is turned in, you'll start working on section 2, section 3, etc. Okay? So the first thing, again, start analyzing your book and grab some storyboards, print them off, or take what's in the classroom and start storyboarding section 1. Some of you have done that already. But what you need to think about with that is, again, the left side is what's happening on the page of those storyboards. The right side of that column, or the right column on that page, is what you need to know. What's the data you need to know? What's the information you need to know? File names, layers. So if I was going to show this, I would need to know that I needed the yo-yo.psd. I needed the title.psd, right? So you need to be specific for each one of those panels. Again, we will get into this more. I'll show you some examples, but I just want you to be aware of that. That's what I want you to start working on. The other thing that we'll need to do is start building that folder structure for assignment 6, and everything beyond that will use this folder. Okay? Oops. Like I said, look for animations. Kind of looked at this as an example. But planning your book, building your animations, that's the next part. Like I said, sorry about that jumping around, but watching samples, analyzing your book, put together a storyboard of that first section. You'll do the whole section. You'll do the sections for the whole book, storyboards for the whole book, but set up that structure. So here's that structure. Should be assignment 6. Mine is final. Ignore that, please. Assets and Premiere. 2 folders there. Within the Assets folder, you should have music, scans, sound effects, and video. That's it. Premiere is your actual working folder, where the Premiere file is and everything. Okay? So that's where we are headed. Do some of that setup. Whoops. Go back here. Do some of that setup. Do some planning. Do some observation. Do some thinking, please. Because I don't want you to get stuck. So keep moving along with that. Finish up assignment 5 and then start looking at what we're going to do for assignment 6.